to be complaining. So that is indeed the measure. So a good place to start, or rather a bad place to start, is that Jamaica's GDP is somewhere about 5,800 US dollars per capita. So you see the disparity. I mean, though there is an absolute disparity in the size of Jamaica, 2.8 million people, 50 to 60,000 persons. But it doesn't really matter, the size. What matters would be the decisions that the government and the people of the country make within the context of their constitution and governance arrangements to have produced the output. Could Jamaica have had a GDP of 55,000 US dollars? The truth is yes. And even though that might sound harsh, Jamaica and Singapore started out at the same point. In fact, Jamaica started out with a higher GDP than Singapore in 1962. So, in a sense, in addressing the diaspora, which is almost like addressing the Jamaican population, we will always celebrate with our friends who have done well. You know, bad mind is not a part of Jamaica. We celebrate those that have done well. And on introspection, we have to look at ourselves, because ultimately, at the end of the day, regardless of the disadvantages, regardless of the unequal endowment, regardless of the historical context, today, Jamaica is a sovereign nation, and we have been a sovereign nation since 1962. So ultimately, we can only blame ourselves. So I start from that perspective, and I believe I can truly say that because I'm the first Prime Minister to be born after independence. And that means something. It means that the social and political issues which would have been carried over, which would have been very real to those who grew up in the colonial era, would not necessarily have the same weight of impact on my outlook. And my vision for the country would therefore not be limited by the weight of history. Amen. So I come with a different perspective as to what Jamaica should be, yes, and what Jamaica can achieve. But that is all at the aspirational level. There is a practical reality that we have to deal with. The truth is that 80% of the Jamaican population now would not have been alive at the time of independence, but 20% were. So the weight of history is still there. And even then, we have not always made, as a government, as a people, the right decisions that would have secured our economic and social prosperity. So the struggle for prosperity is real. And thankfully, more and more Jamaicans are coming to the view that Jamaica can be a prosperous country. Because for many years, the perspective was that we're not all going to be rich, so may as well we all be poor. I'm afraid to say it, but I have to say it because that at some point was the ethos in Jamaica. The conversation was about poverty. What do I mean by that? There was a sense that there was no social justice in the country. And because there were no ethos of social justice, that anyone who sought to emphasize on, for example, the efficiency of business, being generally efficient with your public bureaucracy, being orderly, being a society that is disciplined, encouraging enterprise, and allowing people to make a profit. Those things were looked upon ultimately as a bad thing, because it meant that only some persons would get. And the truth of the matter is that that is how the society worked. If you are rich, or if you are born to a rich family, then you continue to be rich, and you continue to have the access to all the resources, which would have brought another force into the politics which I referred to before. The consideration of how do you equalize? How do you bring social justice into the conversation? Hence the Jamaican period of the 1970s. So I don't come from the perspective where I say it was a totally, useless period of our existence as a country. The 1970s was an important period of exploring the question of social justice. I take the view that how Michael Manley did it ended up not being the right way. And indeed, when you talk to many Caymanians, they are here precisely because of 1970, when many Jamaicans fled Jamaica. Then came the period of the 1980s, when there was a greater attempt at trying to get the economy going. But the issue of social justice still remains. How do we treat with the poor? How do we deal with poverty? How do we deal with the landless, those that don't have education, those who don't have housing? Is it just about the economy? And so the decade of the 80s was again another important decade. And you would have seen, of course, a shift by 1989 in the view of the electorate, and a shift back in the 1990s for 18 and a half years. Another period which has to be reflected upon honestly and dispassionately. In that period of time, there were attempts to address issues of poverty. And indeed, poverty declined significantly. There was an attempt to deal with infrastructure, and there was, for a period of time, an expansion in the economy. Was it the right model? As it turns out, my view is that it was not the right model. It was a good attempt, but it should have been better. Because that period of 18 and a half years led to economic philosophy, because that's what it almost ended up being, which saw the detriment of the country. That economic philosophy defied, in my mind, any economic science, any economic logic, that we could borrow and spend more than we earn. And we could keep the interest rate high in order to keep the exchange rate low. So we made those economic decisions on a political basis. But that's a false logic. And it led to the change of government ultimately in 2007. And in 2009, there was an economic crisis. You would recall that the global economy collapsed, and Jamaica was not spared. And that led the country to confront itself. We had a debt of 150% of GDP. We were on the brink of defaulting on our debt. Our bauxite earnings had literally disappeared. What were we going to do? We had to go to the IMF. And of course, by 2011, there were other issues which were plaguing the country, which had its roots in the 90s. And that was the geometric increase in homicides and crime generally in the country. Crime moved from in the region of 500 murders per year to over 1,500 murders per year. That was a consequence of the period of the 1990s. So the day of reckoning came. What are we going to do to solve this issue and maintain social justice? Are we going to build our economy and at the same time deal with the social justice issues, which are the underpinnings of the crime, the disorder, and indiscipline in the society? With the support of the IMF, we, for the first time as a country, had to engage in what I would call a consensus building exercise, where both the government and the opposition had to support a common economic cause. And the first of those economic cause that we had to support was the debt exchange. I don't know if any of you remember the debt exchanges that we had. We had first JDX, and then we had the NDX. I was leader of the opposition at the time, and I recall someone coming to me, this was about 2012, 2013 thereabout, saying there is so much social discontent. All you have to do is just go there and be the spark. And that is always appealing for the opposition. Don't listen to that argument. It's easy to just throw gasoline on the fire. It's easy to just oppose for opposing's sake. It's easy to stir up the people, mislead them. And I decided I wouldn't do that. So the records would show that the government gave critical support, the opposition gave critical support to the government in the execution of the economic reform program. There was no bill in Parliament that we were not present, even when they were sprung on us, that we did not work with them till late hours to get them passed. We didn't obstruct any of them. And the critical issues that could easily be misinterpreted for the country, we didn't do that. So the economic success was not the brainchild of the government alone. The opposition played a critical role. And we had to, because the truth is, it started in the period 2009 to 2011. We were the government then when we decided that we would have a fiscal responsibility framework and start to have a program that was economically logical. So being in opposition, we could then go and oppose that. We were consistent. And that consistency, that maturity in opposition, that constructive instead of destructive criticism led us to the period that we are now, where the people again changed government, even in spite of what seemed to be the then government passing all the IMF tests and doing well. What accounted for that? We had a clearer message as to how we would achieve prosperity. Prosperity meaning economic progress and social justice at the same time. Because that is what the country wants. The country wants to see that the economy is progressing, but that they can fulfill their dreams and aspirations and actualize themselves in this economy. So we distilled it very simply for the people. This is about economic growth and job creation. You see, economic growth does not automatically mean job creation. And what is a job? A job is economic independence in your hands. What is a job? A job is the opportunity for you, the average man who is poor, to use the one asset that he has, his labor, to create wealth. And that's what we're doing. So in 2013, the unemployment rate was 16%, 32% for young people. Today, the unemployment rate generally is 8% and 22% for young people. It is agreed that we can't keep borrowing to develop, which is what we've been doing. Much of the development that is in Jamaica comes from borrowing. At some time, you're going to have to pay for it. And the society agreed that it would reserve 7.5% of its GDP in terms of a primary surplus to pay for past consumption. And we have maintained that. It has been reduced progressively, so we've gone from 7.5 to 7, and now we're at 6.5. But it's still very high, and we're paying back our debt. So in 2013, thereabout, our debt was 150% of GDP. Now we're at 98% of GDP. So when you read the articles about the turnaround story of Jamaica, I'm just giving you a very quick history, trying to weave in the political and social considerations that led us here. Right? Because in the 60s, Jamaica was experiencing economic growth of over 7%, as high as 12%. So today, our economic growth is above 1%, but below 2%. And it has been that way for the last 4 years. And we have not yet crossed the 2% threshold. But the good news is we're growing. We're growing. And if you look at the graph of our GDP has just reached, in nominal terms, what it was in 2009 when the global crisis hit. So we're just coming out of recession. The only way forward now for us is up. And I feel the confidence in the economy, in the society. Our consumer index, in terms of measuring confidence, and our producer, the producer index, in terms of confidence, high, very high, historically high records. So, from all perspectives, the economy is turning around. It is doing better. And the best aggregator of information that can predict what an economy is going to do is the stock market. And for the last 2 years, our stock market has been ranked as one of, well, the top performing stock market in the world. So, there is a sense with the savvy investor that the economy is going to do well, and therefore they are taking the risk on that to invest. So the message to the diaspora here is to keep on investing in Jamaica, because I know that you haven't stopped. You might do so reluctantly, you might grumble when you send back the remittances, but you do so anyway. So now I would want to invite you to consider to buy a second home in Jamaica. The real estate market is doing well, and the prices are still reasonable. In fact, they're far far more affordable than here. So I invite you to have your second home in Jamaica. I would also want to say to you that now is the time for Jamaica to be reaching out and having its trade deals with its neighbors. Stronger trade between Jamaica and Cayman is now quite possible and necessary. And then, in our bilateral talks, we have been discussing ways in which that can be achieved. Of course, there is a issue of the visa requirement, but I don't look at things as absolute obstacles. I think that there should be talks on this matter. As the Jamaican economy improves, as we are finding labor for our people, the relationship between our two countries will slowly be redefined to the point where a visa may not even be necessary. That's the objective. That's what we want to do. It shouldn't be that our people have to leave for economic reasons. If they leave, it's because of their choice. They want to travel and see the world, not because they can't have opportunities in their own country. So from me, as Prime Minister of the country, the economic citizenship of our people is important, giving them the economic independence so that their passport means something when they hold up that passport at any border. It's not an issue of whether or not you're coming to stay or you're coming to look work or that you are fully respected as an equal economic citizen. And that work has begun. But there are many opportunities in the region now. Tourism has always been a mainstay for Jamaica, certainly in terms of foreign exchange. The financial services has been a mainstay for Cayman. But it is clear that we are not utilized fully the tourism potential in this region. I believe the last figures I saw was somewhere in the region of about 30 million visitors come to the region. Over 1 billion people travel every year. So, the funny thing is that the studies show that when people go to bed and they think, where should I go and travel in the world? The Caribbean is in the top 10 destination list, but we just don't get that many visitors. And the reason for that is, of course, airlifts. That's one. We don't have enough airlifts. And I congratulate the government of Cayman for improving their airport. That will certainly give you greater capacity for airlift. And we don't look at Cayman improving their airport as a threat to Jamaica. The truth is that you will come to Cayman, you will spend 3 days, but you come to Jamaica and spend 10. What's wrong with that? Yeah, so we want Cayman to improve their airports. And the same thing for the ports, for cruise shipping. It makes eminent sense. We are in Jamaica seeking to build more ports. And more ports right around the region is good. It helps to create greater itineraries for cruise ships so they can come to Jamaica, they can come to Cayman, they can come to Honduras. And it's better for all of us. So the strategy has to be that governments have to cooperate in the strategic thinking about the region. Not to say that if one country does well, then the other one won't do well. So I think that the opportunities now exist for Jamaica and Cayman, and indeed all the CARICOM countries to collaborate on this business of expanding the Caribbean as a tourism destination. I believe all of us will benefit with the rising tide of visitors into the region. So whatever the government is doing in terms of infrastructure here, we laud it, we commend it, and we want to see it happen as quickly as possible, because we are doing the same thing in our country in terms of building out the ports. More visitors to Jamaica ultimately means more visitors to Cayman, and more visitors to Cayman means more visitors to Jamaica. I think I'm boring, I've said enough. I'm certain there will be some questions, so thank you very much.
So Thank you, Mr. PM, and thank you for the lesson on your name. Definitely not make the mistake again. Especially since I went to UA, you might think now that I must have some socialist tendencies. However, I can assure you that they have all gone. One further matter of housekeeping. As many of you know that last week many people traveled from here down to the funeral of the late Mr. Siago, and as a result of some of the individuals